Hello, my name is Darcy and I'm one of your friendly neighborhood teen/20-somethings librarians. Today I'm going to show you how to start your own set of magnet poetry. Let's talk about what you'll need. If you picked up a kit, you should have a magnet sheet with adhesive on one side, a small container of Mod Podge, a paintbrush, a pencil, a printed ruler, a sheet of cardstock, and 2 sheets of important words to use. One of them is fairly small and the other one is a full page. You'll also need a pair of scissors and some fine point pens or pencils. If you have some gel pens that have a fine enough point, those will look really nice. If you didn't get the kit, never fear. All of these supplies can be found at a craft store or even just like a Walmart, and the lists of important words are linked below. So let's get started. So magnet poetry is pretty easy to make. All you really need is to cut out magnets with different words on them and then arrange them on some, metal surface to make some poetry. The tricky bit is really getting all the right kinds of words on your magnets so that you have a fully functioning set. First, we're going to prep our magnet sheet, and then I'll tell you about some types of words that you'll need to pick out if you don't use the full sheet of ready-made words. You have a few options with this magnet poetry set. If you are uninterested in writing your own list of words or handwriting your poetry magnets, which can look really nice, you are more than welcome to just use this pre-printed sheet. So these are words that I thought were kind of fun or funny. The top section and this half sheet or quarter sheet are the same set of important words and bits that you're going to need. So everything else on the bottom of this list are verbs, adjectives, and nouns. They're a wide variety, but these are your important kind of in-between words, your conjunctions, your prepositions, your word endings if you need to change tense. So no matter which way you choose to make your poetry, I would recommend that you include all of these words and little bits and punctuation in your sheet. Okay, if you are interested in making your magnet poetry set using only the words that we have given you, which includes the section of really important words you need to include, which is also printed on this shorter sheet, and a bunch of verbs, nouns, and adjectives that I thought were fun. You can just use this. You'll still have some strips of white at the top and the bottom of your page that you can use to add in words that maybe you realize you want to include in your set, or that you need to make your words the right tense. That's okay. So if you're going to use this option, the first thing we're going to do is trim this page to size. So I'm going to set my unpeeled magnet sheet on top of my words until I cannot see them at all. And I've got a kind of squared off frame. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does make it easier. And then I'm going to trace around this frame with my pencil. Take the magnet sheet off. All of our words still fit in there. Some of them are a little tight, but that's okay. And now I'm going to cut out along my drawn lines. With our now trimmed sheet of paper, it will fit perfectly on top of our magnet sheet. You can peel the adhesive backing off of your magnet sheet and just slap it on there. Just try and keep it as even to the edge as you can. Now, if you try and put this paper down and mess it up, it doesn't line up perfectly, there is a solution. So this page I didn't center correctly, and I could peel it off a little bit on the top and bottom, but not like great, and the middle is just garbage basically. But instead of just tossing this magnet sheet, which would be a bummer, we can actually just put a thin layer of Mod Podge over the places where the paper still is and these edges, and then put our words on top of it. So if you ruin your word sheet, you can either print another one out using the link below, or you can go ahead and just use your cardstock sheet on top of your messed up regular printed sheet and write them out instead. It's totally fine. So let me show you what the Mod Podge option looks like. And then we're going to very carefully place our words on this sheet. And then you're going to let it dry completely before you move on to the next step. If you just use the adhesive, you don't have to wait. So I'll set this one aside while waiting for it to dry and show you our other options. So your second option is to kind of do a mix. If you want, you can use this sheet, but also use the cardstock. You would just peel the adhesive off, stick this sheet on the top, stick the cardstock under it, or flip it upside down, stick the cardstock under it so that you don't have any magnet showing, and then trim off any excess edges. But what I'm going to show you is how to completely write your own magnets. So a fully handwritten set of magnet poetry looks really cool. And that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to peel the adhesive off. You don't need to measure or trim off any edges of your cardstock because it doesn't really matter. And then I'm just going to flop it down on top of the cardstock. Press it all the way in. And now I'm going to trim off the edges. And so we have a beautifully cardstock topped piece of magnet sheet. So we want our magnets to be mostly uniform if at all possible. So we're going to grab our printed measuring tape. And if you hold it up against the side of your magnet sheet, all the blue lines should perfectly align with the edge. So we're going to draw dashes at each black line on one side, and then we'll repeat it on the other top side. So you're only going along the length of the paper. Make sure you do this part in pencil. You really don't want it to be very obvious, and we'll probably erase it later. Now we're going to use the flat edge of our tape and draw lines connecting the dashes that we just made. Once you have finished fully lining your paper, before you get started writing out your words, we are going to trim off the bottom two lines that are blank so that you have them as backup. If you realize you've forgotten some words, missed something, want to add something funny or weird, you'll have them when you need them, and you can always seal them later with Mod Podge. So we're going to be really careful when we cut because we want our lines to be as straight as possible. We'll tuck these two little strips away so that they will be safe. Now, with our main sheet, we are going to start writing in our words. You want to leave a little bit of space between each word so that you can trim it out. And I would strongly recommend starting with your important words if you didn't tape them down to the top of your paper. I am going to take a pen. I have a very fine point pen here. And I'm just going to start writing out all of these words.
Editing Darcy here to give you a crash course reminder in the kinds of words you'll need to include in your poetry kit if you're going to write your own entirely. So you'll absolutely need nouns, verbs, and adjectives, but you'll also need conjunctions, pronouns, adverbs, prepositions, interjections, suffixes, prefixes, and modifiers. So we'll go through each one at a time. So we'll start with the basic three, nouns, verbs, and adjectives. I didn't include any of these on your basic word list, the short one, because it's fun to add your own, and these are the easiest ones to pull up, basically. One thing to note is that it's easier to keep all of your words in the present and active tenses, like run instead of running or ran. It's not a hard and fast rule, but your suggested word sheet does include some modifiers that can change tenses of words most of the time, and you can always write them in if you need to. All right, so nouns. Nouns are a person, place, or thing, like happiness, Cthulhu, house, electricity, depression, Beyonce, you get it. It's nice to have a wide range of nouns, but make sure you include stuff that you think is useful, fun, funny, will be entertaining to have as a magnet poetry set. Verbs are action or being words, like is, become, sachet, entomb, transform, think, aggravate, etc. Again, use verbs that you are going to enjoy playing with in magnet poetry format. Adjectives are descriptive words like pretty, old, new, eldritch, kind, cheerful, deep. Some adjectives are also nouns like colors. You can go ham with adjectives because descriptions are super fun. So if you're looking for good adjectives, nouns, and verbs, I would definitely recommend just Googling lists of them or looking through some of your favorite books potentially. Try and get yourself a nice variety of all three. Now, we're getting to the sneakier parts of speech. These are words that we use constantly, but maybe don't think about as much. In your kit, you've got a list of these words and modifiers that we suggest you add to your poetry kit. I make at least 2 of most of these, which is why you have 2 copies on that sheet, but you can add as many as you think you need. Conjunctions are joining words, like and, but, and or. They join together ideas and phrases, and you definitely need them in your kit. Pronouns are generic nouns used in the place of proper nouns or names like he, she, them, it. You have a couple of tenses in your example sheet of pronouns because a lot of basic pronouns change their forms dramatically when they change tense. Adverbs are also descriptive words like adjectives, but they modify or describe the verb like well, very, quickly, etc. Prepositions relate nouns to other words in a phrase, like on, by, with, about. A prepositional phrase usually includes a preposition to relate the noun to the object, but not always. Interjections are generally things that have an exclamation point after them, like wow, oops, whoops, oh my, zounds. Think old school comic book phrases if you're interested in extra interjections. Now, for these last 3 categories, they aren't, words per se, but they will be handy in modifying some of your standard words. So, suffixes go at the end of a word and modify their tense, word type, or meaning. You can add ly to the end of many nouns to turn them into descriptions, such as love to lovely. Adding the suffix ard or wards, A-R-D or W-A-R-D-S, gives direction. So, in becomes inwards. Prefixes are similar to suffixes, except they go on the front of words to modify them. You can add the prefix un or un to the beginning of words to flip the meaning, like unfriendly and unwise. You can add sub to mean under, like sub-zero and subterranean. Modifiers and punctuation are the letters and little bits you might need to shift a tense or add emphasis. I recommend definitely putting a few of each of these into your magnet poetry set, especially S. I forgot a lot of S's on this sheet, so you might need to write some more in. And that is your crash course in words. Go forth and find some interesting ones. Now, back to the regular project.
All right, these are my important words. So if you look at your sheet, the printed one, you'll notice there's some bold punctuation about halfway through and at the end. That is because this sheet has doubled up so that you get 2 of everything. I didn't do that here because it takes up a lot of your lines, but I did multiply a lot of things that I thought I might need more of. So like the A's, the am's, the D's, lots of the suffixes that I thought would be important in changing word tenses and types. And some of the punctuation I doubled up. I like exclamation points and question marks. But you can add in whatever you want. These are just kind of adding words that are helpful. So for the rest of the page, I'm going to fill in some nouns, verbs, adjectives, maybe a few extra adverbs, a few extra prepositions, things that I think might be helpful. And then I will see you once our page is full. Once you have finished writing out all of your words or your page is completely dry, you're going to apply a layer of Mod Podge over the entire sheet. This is going to seal in your paper and make sure it's not going to get scuffed and grubby. And then you're going to let that dry completely. If you decided to write out your words, depending on the type of ink you use, you might get a little bit of smearing. If that happens, you're just going to blot your Mod Podge on instead of striping it on. It might take a little bit more, but you should have more than enough Mod Podge to do one full page of sealant. And now we're just going to let our pages dry until they are completely dry. Now that our pages are completely dry, we're going to start cutting things out. So the one that you hand wrote, if you did that, is going to be a little bit easier to cut because you're going to just cut along your pencil lines first. But if you used the printed paper, you're just going to cut in between the white spaces, try and keep everything even, and make sure you save those top and bottom bits. Those are going to be your extra pieces in case you need to add more words. Once you have all of your strips cut out, you are going to go through and check each strip to make sure that it is fully adhered to the magnet all the way across before you trim out each of your words. So I know some of these strips, because I had to glue the paper over, are not attached super great at points. So I'm going to add some more Mod Podge there and let these strips completely dry. All right, so all of the strips that I cut that needed to be re-glued down are ready to go. So now we are ready to actually cut out our individual words. So it's fairly tedious, but you're going to go line by line and snip out each word so that it is its own little magnet. And 20 minutes later, we have tons of tiny word magnets. So all that's left to do is stick the magnet back to some kind of metal. The refrigerator is very popular, or even just like a cabinet. Anything would work really. And then start making some poetry. If you realize that you are missing a word that you really want or really need, or find a new word you like, just go ahead and write it in one of your extra strips and snip off the end. And it can add to your collection. So that is how you make your very own set of magnet poetry. And if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments. Thanks for watching.